AFC North, Cincinnati Bengals. Are they the winners of the draft? They get Joe Burrow, and they get Joe Burrow. There we go. They already win. Good job, Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Getting Joe Burrow essentially puts a very firm floor on how you could grade this draft. In theory, they've got a quarterback that's good enough that it completely transforms their franchise. It sends them in a completely different direction. That alone makes it pretty good. To follow that up with T. Higgins at the top of the second, I think is a really nice way of doing it. I'm a huge fan of, okay, we got the quarterback. Now let's give him a receiver to come in with and sort of immediately build a new, QB to wide receiver combination. I think that's a really good methodology. And then they added some defense lower down. I don't know that I love any of those players, but they targeted a position of weakness, and I can't hate that.
Marcus Bailey in the 7th round from Purdue was like, without injury concerns, he would be drafted much higher. Logan Wilson, solid player from Wyoming, a little bit higher than we would have taken him. And then Akeem Davis-Gaither, another linebacker with some edge rush ability from App State. So the three of those guys, linebacker's been an issue for years, the Bengals. So this was one way to attack it in volume. But yeah, I think it's obviously Burrow and T. Higgins that are the key here. I think the Higgins question now, I'm writing this for the site tomorrow. Is AJ Green a trade candidate now? We've talked about this before. He's franchise tagged. And my thought was, so the debate is like, is he part of the long-term plans, right? Past his 32-year-old season this year. And then whether he is or not, should you at least be listening to offers? And if you're going to be listening to offers, do you do it now? Or do you let him play 4, 5, 6 weeks, prove that he's healthy, help the development of Joe Burrow, much like in 2012, Reggie Wayne had one last hurrah with Andrew Luck during his rookie season, but he was clearly not a part of the long-term rebuild for the Colts. So I think that is something to keep an eye on this offseason. What do they do with AJ Green? Because right now, like if you trot out a healthy AJ Green, rookie T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and whatever you make of John Ross staying out, still being there, you could do some damage with that group. I just don't know if the Bengals still need to have this forward-looking approach and say, let's get something for Green before he ends up walking at the end of the year.
I liked your idea that you kind of keep him around for at least the first sort of 6 weeks and then potentially ship him before the trade deadline. That to me makes some sense. I also think at this point, play out the year, like help Joe Burrow as much as possible. If he walks in free agency at the end of it, you get a compensatory pick in a year's time. I don't think there's a huge downside to keeping him on. And even if you lose him without, getting a trade pick back, I don't think that's a bad thing. Somebody in the comments was making the point that the Dolphins drafted an injury-prone quarterback at 5 and therefore a big risk, just like the Jets. I would simply make the point that I think the risk there is significantly less than drafting a Justin Herbert. Say, if I'm taking a risk, I will take a risk on a guy that's had some injuries before I take a risk on a guy that has had playing football problems. That's my point. Like, I mean, look, I think Tua is a far safer pick than a lot of these other guys.
When we evaluate our pick, I mean, a lot of it when we evaluate what teams did, a lot of it's based off our evaluations as well. And we evaluated Tua as a potential franchise quarterback and Herbert as a big question mark. So that's a part of it as well. So Bengals, I believe we gave them an A. We did. Yep. They took care of business. The one question is going to be offensive tackle or just offensive line in general. They only added Hakeem Adeniji from Kansas, a tackle/guard, likely conversion. So I think we were talking about this yesterday in the draft recap show. You can't fill every need in the draft. I think the Bengals are going to have to be shrewd throughout this process during the offseason. Whether or not there's a training camp, whatever happens, are there some cuts? Are there some trade opportunities? Is a guy like Riley Reif from the Vikings going to get cut? A guy that if you picked him up and slotted him in at right tackle to go with Jonah Williams coming back at left tackle, like you're immediately creeping back to he is Mr. Creep back toward average, Riley Reif. He's an upgrade over Bobby Hart. So I think the Bengals, if they want to shore up that offensive line, might have to go this clever route the rest of there's other ways to pick up players, so to speak. So Cincy will have to be in that market, I think. So we gave them an A. Going on to the Cleveland Browns here. It wasn't a high volume draft for them like we've seen in the past. They had 7 picks, and their first 3 picks are all guys that had first round grades from us.
Yes.
That's a good win. And it's not, I don't know if it's the flashiest positions or anything, but Jedrick Wills at tackle, fills the need. I'm assuming he's gonna move over to left tackle with Jack Conklin coming over to play right. Grant Delpit in the second round, the safety out of LSU, and then Jordan Elliott, the interior defensive lineman out of Missouri. We loved him, thought he was a first round value. I expected him to go in the second round. I was surprised to see him there in the third. So obviously like what he brings to the table.
Yeah, Jordan Elliott was one of the more confusing draft day drops. Elliott and Josh Jones were the two that I really didn't have a good explanation for. Like you say, there's some guys that we like and you understand why they're falling. You know, Curtis Weaver, we talked about this before. Ben Stockwell, when he watched him play, he was like, I think he's going to be on a day 3 pick. And, you know, we've been talking about him as potentially a first round caliber talent, the same way we did with Trey Flowers back in the day. But you at least understood, right? It made sense why teams would not like that guy and why he would fall that far. Elliott, I don't really see the negative. I don't see the downside to the point where he goes from whatever about us pushing him for a first rounder. But as you say, out of the second into the third, I don't get that. There's too much upside. You know, when you look at our grades, just in the SEC, right? The SEC, the bastion of all NFL play. It's the vintage college conference. It's where you look for all the quality. Jordan Elliott had the best grade just against SEC people, not Derek Brown, not Javon Kinlaw, Jordan Elliott. So this guy was proven quality against quality competition and fits what the NFL wants to do right now, which is pass rush. So I think getting him in the third is an absolute steal. It's one of the best picks in the draft. Wills, Delpit, as you say, they're also guys really high up on our list. So I think they nailed this draft with the 1, 2, 3, kind of like the Vikings. They could have checked out after those first 3 picks and they would have had a good draft.
I mean, you even add Harrison Bryant, the tight end out of Florida Atlantic. I know some other, we liked him among a poor tight end class, but know some other people that really liked him around the league. I think with Bryant, paying the money to Austin Hooper, David Njoku's there, the 2017 first rounder. There are some rumors about him potentially being on the trading block. So that just gives them some flexibility. New head coach Kevin Stefanski used all that 2 tight ends, 12 personnel last year with the Minnesota Vikings. It seems like that's what they want to continue. Again, the question mark is wide receiver. Do you feel good enough about Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, and then guys like Tywan Taylor as the number 3? I think that's a place where the same way the Bengals should be looking, I think the Browns might be able to find some value. The point I made on our show yesterday morning, right? Every time our colleagues said, you got to draft a wide receiver. It's the deepest class. It's the deepest class. My counterpoint to that is because there's a million wide receivers coming into the league now, there is still some talented wide receivers that are going to, you know, hit the streets at some point, right? They're going to get pushed off of rosters and be valuable players. Whether John Ross, right? I would take a flyer on a John Ross reclamation project if he became a free agent. I'm just using him as an example. A guy like Deshaun Jackson, like there's no room for him in Philadelphia anymore. They just got 4 guys that they hope can be the next Deshaun Jackson. So, you know, he's going to be out there. So the teams that didn't get one of these top receivers in the draft in this really loaded class, I think there's going to be some talent out there on the street. I think the Browns would be smart to look and improve that wide receiver core. But as far as what they got for value, really like it. Grant Delpit can cover tight ends. He's got really good range on the back end. I like what he brings as a safety when he's not missing tackles.
My guy, Devin Smith as well, potentially available for, you know, nothing once this starts to shake itself out. But the other point I think is that it means there's some good players available, like at the back end of this draft, right? Some good receivers and even guys like undrafted free agents. There are some undrafted free agents that signed that I think will make rosters and contribute. So the Browns take a swing on Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, he's a good receiver. There's a chance that he works out with a better quarterback situation than Shea Patterson. Like I don't hate risk,
for sure.
Right. That's what I mean. Like you take a guy in the 6th that in a normal draft is like a 3rd round receiver. Like if you start looking at some of these receivers as like an extra 3rd round pick, essentially, it starts to change the dynamic of how you evaluate the class a little bit.
I like diversifying my day 3 picks, right? If you deploy your 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks in different manners, so you could take them and you could flip them for like a Calais Campbell, you can flip them for an established veteran. I think that's where you find your run stoppers. You find guys that are going to fill a specific role and contribute. You find run stoppers. You find potential starting linemen like a Tyler Biotish that the Cowboys got, a starting center. And then you get the athletes, right, who, they might be a little bit more boom or bust, or, they had some situations that held them down from a production standpoint, like a Donovan Peoples-Jones. So it's easy to like day 3 picks when they kind of fall into those different categories. Pittsburgh Steelers did not have many picks, only 6. Started with 6, ended with 6. B- grade for them. I don't think it was anything flashy here. Chase Claypool, the wide receiver out of Notre Dame, I think they'll make use of him, right? I think he's a vertical threat, and when you pair him with the other pieces on the table, Juju Smith-Schuster as more of a high-end possession receiver, right, who could work out of the slot, Deontay Johnson, your route runner, James Washington, and Chase Claypool can both stretch the field a little bit with different body types. So I don't hate it as a pick. Their first-round pick, of course, was used to trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, this is one of the draft classes that I don't love, but I don't hate it either. I mean, it's just, like you say, solid, sort of unspectacular, not flashy. They just sort of ticked off some players at positions that they had to fill in the roster and did a reasonable job of it. So, yeah, this is one I really don't have a lot to say on.
Kevin Dotson is a 4th-round interior lineman who's got a chance to compete at guard. Again, that fits. Like, if you get a day 3 guy that could fill a starting role, Dotson's there. He's got some work to do in pass protection. Then Alex Highsmith, the edge defender in round 3, small school out of Charlotte, but he can get around the edge. And from a Steelers perspective, they put a ton of pressure on those edge defenders, right? They need those guys to perform in their scheme. Bud Dupree franchised, so I'm calling him Bud Dupree insurance, and they do truly attack that position we always say, draft a quarterback every year in the draft. Like the Steelers draft an edge rusher every single year because it's that important to their system. So with TJ Watt on one side, Bud Dupree potentially gone within a year, Alex Highsmith certainly worth a shot at the 102nd pick in the draft.
This is another one where it all sort of hinges on the one guy, right? It kind of, to me, this entire draft class swings on what Chase Claypool becomes and even how they deploy him. He was getting a lot of buzz at tight end in the draft process because of his size and his measurables and how sort of freaky an athlete it turned out he was. And then you watch how he was winning at the Senior Bowl. So how he gets used and how he develops is going to be the thing that determines this.
I think the Steelers would be one of the teams. I haven't listened to the press conferences because they usually explain what their plan is in the post-draft press conferences. I haven't listened, but of all the teams, I would expect the Steelers maybe to do it. Like if Claypool went to like a Shanahan system or a McVay or or Matt LaFleur, like one of those systems that truly just says like you're an inline tight end, that's what you do. We'll move you around a little bit, but they don't really have a big difference. A tight end is different from wide receiver in their system. The Steelers feel like a team that would adjust a little bit, that has 3 wide receivers that they feel decent about, but they also have just Vance McDonald at tight end and some question marks. I could see them experimenting with a hybrid role with Claypool. Like if I drafted Claypool, I don't know if I'd take him as high as the 2nd, but I just think the payoff is at tight end, not wide receiver. So I would do, just like we always say, let a guy stay at tackle until he fails, because the payoff at tackle is better than guard. I think the payoff for him at tight end to become a Darren Waller conversion is just so great. You have to try it. And then the fallback is, okay, you're a vertical threat at tight end with some ball control, with some body control that can do some nice things. So that's my feeling on the Steelers draft. Unexciting, but Claypool is going to be a big part of it. B- for the Steelers. Baltimore Ravens. We ended up with a B for them. The Ravens, who we always say make great decisions, did draft a running back in the 2nd round.
Everybody else thinks this is one of the best drafts in the entire NFL. Explain to me what it is they're seeing to make them think that, because I mean, it's certainly not bad, but I can't. I mean, when you consider some of the other drafts out there, right?
It's not one of the best.
See how you can argue it's one of the best.
It is. So there's a role for the top 4 guys, right? Patrick Queen, speedy linebacker. Love what he adds to their back 7, which already has an athletic, versatile bunch. We've talked about it quite a bit about how the Ravens have safeties playing linebacker and all this stuff. He's just another asset on the back end. He moves like a safety. He's an inexperienced football player, only a little over 1,000 snaps in his career, but he can make plays on the ball and coverage. That's a win. skip J.K. Dobbins for a second. Justin Madubuike, the 3rd-round pick, we had him as a 2nd-round value as an interior defensive player. When I watch him, I just think technique. The guy wins, knows how to destroy blocks. I think he's a contributor up front. And then Devin Duvernay, sub 4.4 speed, slot receiver type that has running back type after the catch skills. Like you wanted Laviska Shenault in this offense. This is
right.
It's light, Laviska light, right? And Duvernay, you get him in the 3rd round, great. And then even the late picks, like a Geno Stone, we liked quite a bit. Like that dude could contribute as a coverage safety. I think where we don't like it as much is the process of adding a running back in the 2nd round and the fact that there are better players on the board. And J.K. Dobbins will probably produce there, but the Ravens have shown that anybody is going to produce in that system because of all the pieces around them.
Right. It's like I say, I definitely don't want to act like I hate the draft, that I think it's a bad one. It's just so this sort of accumulation of all the grades thing that somebody posted. Who was the guy that posted this? But Rene Bugner is the guy that posted it on Twitter. There's 13 draft grades that he's got in here. 10 of the 13 gave the Ravens some form of A. 2 of the 3 that didn't gave them a B plus. We were the lowest people out there with a B. So you look at this and I just don't see A. I think, Patrick Queen is a nice pick. It's around the area where he should have gone. On the other hand, it isn't one of the most valuable positions for a team that understands what value should be, etc. Dobbins is even more a sort of an anti-value type of pick. He'll be good in that system. It's ironic because the running backs that went high, J.K. Dobbins, Edwards-Helaire for the Chiefs, I think both those guys will look fantastic. But I think the reason that's true is because they went to the 2 best running back environments in football. So it's like he'll look great, but all the data says that it's a poor allocation of resources because of what's involved in generating that look. Like I say, it's good. It's solid across the board. I just don't quite understand where all the A+ talk is coming from.
I think it's because some people thought J.K. Dobbins was like a fringe 1st-round running back. So the people who don't have their top running back at 74 on their draft board like we do probably look at this and say, Queen and Dobbins, both potential 1st-round players, or rumored. So they got 2 1st-round players. Madubuike, a 2nd-round player they got in the 3rd. Duvernay, maybe a 2nd-round player they got in the, I think they just, to a lot of people, perception-wise, they got players around later than they expected them to go. So it's solid. All right. I mean, Ben Bredesen, I think, has starting potential at guard. Man, if you could find a starting guard on day 3, you can't ask for much more. And he's at least in that mix, I think. So I like him better than Tyre Phillips from Mississippi State, who's just a big monster mauler. But, there's diversified funds here, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.